So we're in the middle of chapter 7, yeah? Can anyone corroborate? We're in the middle of chapter 7? Yeah? Okay. And if you remember in chapter 6, we began to speak about what's Kedusha and what's Klippa. And we had pretty categorical definitions for them. Kedusha is anything that is totally surrendered to the service of Hashem. And Sitracham, literally meaning the other side, means anything other than that. So if it's not dedicated to the service of Hashem, by default, then it's the other stuff. But then we said, but there are gradations. There are gradations. And we spoke about irredeemable klippa and redeemable klippa. And then in chapter 7, we started speaking more in depth about the redeemable klippa, which has a technical term. It's called klippas noiga, which literally means the shiny or luminescent klippa. It is a husk. It does cover the spark of godliness within, but it's not entirely opaque. You can see how it can potentially be used to serve Hashem, how the godly potential within it can be unleashed and harnessed. And we spoke about various different examples, like eating in order to be able to settle your body and be able to think better and therefore learn Torah more sharply. We spoke about even using humor and wit to sort of get the mind flowing in order to be able to, again, to learn Torah better. Yeah? Sound familiar? Yeah. Okay, fine. So I think, does anyone remember exactly what, I think we got to Ach mishuhu bezelei basar v'seve yain. However, yeah, that's where we're at. However is a pivot. Notwithstanding the fact that we just said that one can elevate the mundane and direct its energy to the service of Hashem. However, Mishahu bezelei basav v'seveyayin, one who is stam a freser. That's how we say it in Jewish. Someone who's just indulging for the heck of it. Lamalis taivus gufa v'nafshi abamis, in order to indulge the desire of his body and his animal soul. And like we said at the end of chapter 1, this penchant of the animal soul to run after pleasure comes from the elemental water, which is in the composition of the animal soul. We spoke about that at the end of chapter 1, about the presence of the different elements in the animal soul and what characteristics they bring out of it. So if somebody is drawn after, we're going to give the example right now, food, just for the fun of it, through that act, the chayas, the vitality of that meat and wine, we're just using meat and wine as bywords right now. It could be a cupcake, it could be anything. The vitality of that meat and wine are descended, they're brought down, dragged down. Like we were saying before, if he uses it the right way, then it goes up. Remember, we even said like a korban, like a sacrifice on the altar, where the matter is transformed into energy as the fire burns the animal that's on the altar and it ascends to heaven. Here's the opposite. It's going down. V'nichlo lefisha, and it becomes temporarily relegated biragomer, into complete evil, shebeshleisha klippas tameas, to that other category, which we call the 3 utterly unclean klippos. So it went from neutral klippa to the lower category of klipa. Now, please notice those two words, lefi shah. Lefi shah. For the moment, for the time being. For the time being, that's important. That's important to keep in mind. That it is temporarily being relegated to that lower level of klipa. We'll speak about that later. That it's possible to retrieve it from there, since after all, the food itself wasn't shalosh klippas atameus, it was only klippas noiga, and that it was misused. The gufay, and then at this moment that he is misusing the klippas noiga and turning it into shalosh klippas atameus by indulging and using it selfishly and mindlessly and for no particular spiritual intent, what happens to his own body, the person who's doing this, the Jew who's doing this, what happens to his own body? The gufay, his body, naisa lohen levushim merkava, becomes for these utterly unclean klippas a garment and a chariot, a vehicle. Again, I'm going to say the two words that come next. I'm going to say them loud. Lefi shah. Temporarily. It doesn't mean your body is permanently, God forbid, a vehicle for the utterly unclean klippas. It just means at that moment. At that moment. Lefi shah. We're following so far? We're doing okay? You following the mechanics of this, what we're describing? It's not that complicated. We've been talking about taking things, well, to be specific, mostly about food, because it's an easy example. Although we'll talk about things that are a little bit more elusive a little bit later in the chapter. Food is just more tangible, easier to talk about. It's easier to describe it's being used up. You know, it's clearly fuel. It's clearly, there's that matter to energy conversion that happens. You eat the food, you burn the calories. So what we're saying is if the food is neutral, meaning it's not holy or unholy, it's just regular kosher food, and the person ate it mindfully, it goes up, it becomes holy, like a sacrifice on the altar. If he does it, though, for no particular spiritual intent, just for the heck of it, then it goes down. And the words I'm stressing over and over again are lefi shah, temporarily. Okay? So far, so good. Continue. Yeah? The energy of the food goes down. What does it mean, goes down? We're not talking up, down. It's categorization, its status, its spiritual status goes down a notch.
What about the person?
And then we said the person, let's get specific, we said gufay, his body, becomes at that moment, he uses two terms which are fairly synonymous. Levushe, levush means a garment, and merkava, a chariot, a vehicle. So his body at that moment becomes a vehicle for these negative energies. He's harnessing these lower energies in this moment of mindless indulgence.
Is that applicable like Chabad and Rosh Chodesh? Also, like all year long, or Yomim Tovim?
We said earlier, we gave examples of how you could elevate the food. We said Shabbos, Yom Tov is a way of elevating it. Okay? So it's not complicated yet. All right. Yeah. So we said lefi shah, okay? Now, until asher yashuv ha'adam, the person will return, the person will do tshuva, get back on track, v'yachzer l'avodas Hashem l'teiraseh, and return to the service of Hashem and His Torah. So he's in the midst of squandering this conversion of neutral energy into spiritually holy energy. He could be. Let me back up. Anytime the Jew encounters some permissible physical activity, there's a potential there for an elevation. But he didn't do the elevation. He did it mindlessly. So he's in the midst of squandering that potential. But then he catches himself. He says, hold on. I realize I'm misusing this resource, the meat, the wine, the cupcake, the whatever it is. So then it's very easy, it's very simple to stop, change your focus, change your mindset, and get back on track. Yeah?
You know what's confusing me?
What's confusing?
This is the first introduction of the concept of temporary, right? Chapter 7.5?
Yeah.
Okay, so all the other changes until now are permanent? Because it doesn't specify that they're
What
temporary.
other changes do we speak about?
Anything that was elevated, anything that was enhanced, anything that stay enhanced and stay elevated?
Oh, you're saying that when he uses, previously when we said that he does it the right way, are you worried that that's also temporary?
Right.
Like you're going to get a letter a year from now and they're going to say, by the way, we checked in on that.
You said everything's in flux.
Yeah, okay. So we've reviewed your account and we want to make an adjustment. Actually, I want to tell you, yeah, you think that that salad you ate L'Shem Shemayim last February? No, because I don't know, whatever, however they would bust you. Okay. Listen, here's the beauty of it. Once it's done, it's done. In a good way. Like you go and you eat the food and you actually use that energy to go learn or to daven or to do a mitzvah. Okay, thank God. That's you already, it's like you spent that money. You know, the money that I spend on tzedakah, I can't misspend anymore because I got rid of it. Thank God. I don't have it anymore. Okay? So you cashed it in the right way. It's done. Okay. But now this is talking about you're in the midst of misusing, of squandering the energy that's in something that's spiritually neutral. So if you catch yourself, you can immediately get back on track and start spending the energy in the right way and directing it the right way and causing an elevation instead of, God forbid, a descent. Okay. Now he explains something fascinating. He says, why is it so simple to just simply switch your mindset and start redirecting the energy? He says, because shezehu lashon hater mutter. After all, this is the very meaning of the word hater, which means permission, and mutter, which means permissible. Klaimar, that is to say, she'eni kosher. It's not kosher with a kuf, not kosher with a chaf, but kosher with a kuf, tied down. Like kesher with a kuf means tied down. Well, it means a knot. It's not kosher, it's not tied down, va'asur, and bound bidei hachitzainim, in the hands of the extraneous forces. In a way where it would not be able to come back and ascend to Hashem. In other words, this piece of meat or wine is permissible meat or wine. Again, I'm just using meat and wine because that's the example that he uses. It's getting misused. Okay, so then for that moment, Lefi Shah, it's being relegated to a lower level. But it's not inherently on that lower level. So the moment that you get your focus back and you start using it for the sake of heaven, so then you're going to be able to cause an elevation to the energy in the food. Because the energy in that food is not irredeemable. It's not tied down, literally. It's untied. It can go any direction you want it to go. It's all up to you. So you didn't focus, you squandered the opportunity. Great, now get back on track and do focus.
Retroactive to the first bite.
Okay, so that's another question. How retroactive is it? And we'll speak about retroactive effect soon. But let's for now just talk about moving forward from here on out.
So it is what you make it.
It is what you make it. That's what klipas noiga is. Klipas noiga is whatever you make it. It's neutral. It could go up, it could go down. You decide.
How long do you need to keep that focus?
So that's always the classic question. How long do you need to keep the focus? Do you need to keep the focus while you're consuming it, or actually all the way until you've used the energy? Which would obviously be a longer amount of time.
You mean you need to keep the focus longer than the half a second you say the bracha?
So let's, baby steps. First, make a bracha. Then think about the bracha. Then think about the food and try to have an intent that it's fuel for serving Hashem. Then actually use it to serve Hashem. And then you're safe. After you used up the calories on mitzvahs, then you're safe. He's making a very, very important point here that I think observant Jews need to keep in mind. I'm saying Jews who try to conduct life according to halacha. There are so many rules that govern our lives regarding what is permissible, what is forbidden. And I think there's a great misunderstanding of the nature of permissibility and impermissibility. You go to a cheap motel, Red Roof Inn, and they have the remote bolted to the desk. The lamps, the phone, everything is bolted to the desk. Why? Why do they have everything bolted down? They don't want you to steal it. Right. Okay. If they could bolt the towels down, they would bolt the towels down.
No, it's a big problem.
Yeah.
But I can't tell they're like red anyway.
Now, if you go to the Four Seasons, they're not bolting anything down.
They want you to steal it.
They wa- So the question is like this. Is the world like a sleazy motel? No, it's not sleazy. God forbid. I'm not saying it's sleazy. It's just whatever. It's not fancy. Is the world like a budget motor inn where God has bolted down? He says, oh, you see that? I don't want any of you Jews taking my ham sandwiches, so I'm making them usser. Usser means bound, tied down. It's kosher, not kosher with a chaf, not kosher, kosher with a kuf. It's tied down. I'm bolting it down so you Jews can't have it. I'm afraid you're going to steal those ham sandwiches and run away with them, so I bolted it down. Is that what it is? In other words, I understand that heter, meaning permissibility, means untied. Like matir asurim, he who unties the bound, like we say in morning brachas. I understand that. And I understand that asur, forbidden, means bound, tied down, bolted to the desk. But my question is like this. Is it forbidden because it's tied down, or is it tied down because it's forbidden? That's an important question. And that'll determine your entire attitude toward the halachas which govern that which is permissible and impermissible. In other words, if it is tied down because it's forbidden. If it's tied down because it's forbidden, what does that mean? It means that Hashem says, I don't want you to have it, and therefore, I'm bolting it to the table so you can't run away with it.
Takes the choice.
Is that the name of the group, Kesher Nafshi? Is that why they chose it?
That also is connection, tying. That's
But in a good way.
in a good way. That's.
Yeah.
You guys all lost the focus? We're in the middle of something. Okay. Okay, guys, focus. If it's forbidden because it's tied down. Actually, I said the opposite before. I said if it's tied down because it's forbidden. Meaning to say, Hashem says, I don't want you to take this, so therefore I'm bolting it to the desk. So it's like the Motel 6. Or is it tied down because, or is it forbidden because it's tied down? In other words, it is tied down. It's not useful in the life of a Jew. So therefore Hashem comes along and gives you guidance and clarity and says, hey, sweetheart, I don't want you to break your heart and get disappointed dealing with that thing. It's tied down. Therefore, I'm telling you, don't mess with it. In other words, forbidden isn't, I'm just trying to deprive you of some pleasure that you could otherwise have. Forbidden means I'm letting you know, this thing, you can't use it. It's like you want to put water in your gas tank, it's not going to work. So don't do it. Oh, you're depriving me. I'm not depriving you. I'm informing you that this isn't going to do anything that you need it to do. So it's a very important distinction.
That makes so much sense, because the whole Tanya, you said, is like a guidebook, a compiler of guides.
Yeah. So something that is klipas noiga is not tied down. And that's why the category of klipas noiga is synonymous with the halachic term of mutter. In halachic terms, we call it mutter, permissible. In Kabbalistic terms, we call it klipas noiga, the luminescent husk. But they're the same concept. Where something that's asur in halachic terms, meaning forbidden, is literally tied down. And the reason that it's forbidden is because it's inherently tied down. It's a waste of your time and your energy. You're not going to be able to do anything with it. So therefore, Hashem steers you clear of it to avoid wasting your time and breaking your heart. Okay, that makes sense? Okay. Rak, however, now we said that since, again to use the example of the meat or the wine that he was indulging in mindlessly, they are not inherently shalosh klipas tameis. They were only temporarily relegated to that level because of his lack of intent. And as soon as he picks back up the focus, he'll stop squandering that energy. However, he says it's not entirely retroactive because we have a problem. The problem is that he's been metabolizing that energy, and that energy has been turning into physicality. Yeah, because when you eat and you get the calories and it becomes part of your flesh and blood, so what spiritual state was that energy in when it became your flesh and blood? If you were doing it mindlessly while you were consuming it, so it's in that state, and now if it already metabolized and already became part of your flesh and blood, now it's sort of irretrievable. So he says, Rak, shaharashimu mimenu nishar baguf. a residue of it, a trace, a leftover, it will remain in the body. Like we explain later, that's why the body will require, after passing, the body will require something called chibut hakaver, which is basically decomposition, where the negative energy that materialized as part of the flesh and blood is going to become dislodged or removed. It's got to get knocked off. So there's a process for that. It's not pleasant, but he's just letting you know, yeah, that stuff has to still be removed, and Hashem has a way to do that. Okay, it's not so delightful to think about at length, but it is what it is. Okay. Yeah.
Does that ever get removed in this world?
So, does it ever get removed in this world? The simple answer is that I believe it can. And I don't know how to give, I'm not a personal trainer, so I don't know how to exactly chart people like know their body fat percentages and stuff like that. So there'd be maybe what percentage of my body is made up of food that I consumed mindlessly, and at what point will that have been?
No, because the rabbi mentioned that when a person passes away,
Yeah.
whatever of that
Right.
negative excursion-
So that's what I'm telling you. What I'm
So what about the pain?
right. So, through pain. Oh, this isn't pain and suffering. The pain and suffering stuff is we got a lot of different debts to work off. No, the pain and suffering works off other stuff. Yeah. So, but if a person were to be really, really careful from here on out and get rid of all the excess, the metaphorical and literal fat in their Avodas Hashem, then you could probably finish working it off before 120.
So does that mean that all Bainonim go to purgatory, and tzaddikim are the only ones who go straight up and don't suffer at all?
So, first of all, suffering that we're describing right now, we're going to talk a little about Gehenna a little bit later. But yeah, a little bit, very briefly.
We already have it here.
The spiritual Gehenna. But here it's talking about decomposition, and you're asking a question about tzaddikim. It's a known fact. Unfortunately, horrifically, it's something that's been verified through history, because it's painful to say, but Jewish graves have been defaced and defiled and throughout the ages. So we've seen tzaddikim be exhumed, and it's based on a Gemara, but the truly righteous, the entirely righteous, their flesh doesn't rot, and we know many stories of perfectly righteous individuals whose bodies were intact long after their passing, perfectly intact long after their passing. I don't know if that's an incentive to people to eat more mindfully, but yeah, right. Well, the tzaddik is always mindful because, we haven't really defined tzaddik very well yet, but yeah, a tzaddik is perfectly mindful. Yeah. Okay, now, are we ready? That's the first question. I'm not even going to tell you what it's about. I'm going to say, are we ready? Okay. So remember, I was saying we've been talking so far about food. We're talking a lot about food, And food is a big one, obviously. You know, you got to eat. And it's a big part of life. Okay. And it's one of those things that's unavoidable and necessary, and it can be elevated or it could be not elevated. And we spoke about the consequences of not elevating it. So there's another area of life that is a biological fact. If there's to be a continuation of the species, there's a biological fact. It's a part of life. And it in itself is neutral. It's a biological act, like eating. And if it's done the right way, then it can be elevated. In fact, it can be the holiest thing. And if it's not done the right way, it can become the lowest thing. So we're talking about the human reproductive potential. And I could skip this part here. Actually, I've been told that some of the girls' schools skip this part. I think it just makes them look at it more, more interested. Yeah. Don't read this one paragraph. Okay. Exactly.
It tells not to, then we'll look at it.
So, let's take a look here. Does anyone have a? Can I have an act like a chitas right there, up there? The chitas would be good. Yeah, yeah. Because I'll show you something really interesting. Shikaya, thank you. There's something called the Lua Tikanvaharas, which is basically amendments or corrections that the Rebbe made. And usually they're really like correcting one letter, maybe sometimes correcting a word. Usually they're really short, very small corrections. There's one place though, and it's here in this chapter, where the correction is a few lines, not a few lines, but a few words, a whole phrase, which is missing.
And where, in Tanya?
In Perek Zayin, and here in this chapter.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Rebbe adds it. So here.
When was that compiled? When was that? Correction, addendum, whatever you want to call it.
In the past generation. Yeah.
No.
I never saw a chita,
So let me just zero in here on the text.
Rabbi Taub, some people never saw a chita.
Oh, this is a book that has Chumash, Tehillim, and Tanya all together in one binding. Yeah, so that you can do your daily study program of Chumash, Tehillim, and Tanya. Okay. So here it says, "Rak shereshim meno nishar baguf, v'alkin tzarech haguf lechibot hakaver, k'meshikosu lekamon," and the residue remains, a trace remains behind in the body. That's why it needs the decomposition, which is spoken about later. And then the next word is masha ein kein b'maycholas asures ubias asures. He switches to talking about things that are fundamentally prohibited, meaning stuff that it wasn't that it was misdirected by your lack of mindfulness, it's inherently off limits. But if you look if you like, use the lessons in Tanya, let's say, where they have the Tanya's text amended, or if you go to the back of a Tanya and you look in the Luach of Tikanvaharas, so it adds this phrase here. V'chein, I'm going to read you the phrase. V'chein hachayus shebetipa zera sheyotz mimeno betaiva bahamis sheloi kiddush atzmei b'shas tashmish im ishtoi tahira. And also the vitality in the drops of seed that come forth when having animalistic lust, because he did not sanctify himself at the time of marital intimacy with his wife when she was in her pure state. Okay, let's clarify what that's saying. Nothing forbidden has happened here whatsoever. That's very important to understand. It's his wife. She's not a nida. Everything is kosher. It's all permissible. Just like we were talking about before about kosher foods, where the food itself was perfectly redeemable, perfectly useful, and it just got misused. So here he equates the misuse of kosher food with the misuse of a kosher intimate act. That the act could have potentially been elevated because there was nothing forbidden about it whatsoever. But it was done simply for animalistic pleasure without any deeper intent, and therefore it had the opposite effect. Spiritually, it became relegated to a lower level. But again, that is Lefi Shah, it's temporary, and you just have to get your mind back on track in order to reverse the situation. Yeah?
Isn't it all relative? Like, if one person, let's say, like with food, for one person not saying a bracha with real kavana and being so mindful, it might be the same as for another person who just even acknowledges is that, oh, this is a gift from Hashem, this apple. So how does that affect the food? Level of the person?
Yeah. I mean, you're asking about if these things are relative and if they exist on a continuum, and obviously they do, because, when you're talking about an action, actions are binary. Either you did it or you didn't, right? Like the old joke about the guy on El Al, the flight attendant asks, would you like to eat? He says, what are the choices? She says, 2 choices. You eat or you don't. So when it comes to action, you did it or you didn't. When it comes to kavana, obviously there are endless degrees how deeply you can think about something and feel for something. So to answer the question, yeah, obviously it is on a continuum. There's elevating and then there's elevating. But for the sake of oversimplification, let's just look at it as not how much did you elevate it. Look at it like this. Did it get elevated or did it get wasted? That's it. Let's keep it simple. Yeah.
When the rabbi says wasted or dropped, does that mean it goes into the Sitra Achra?
Well, you're saying, does it go into Sitra Achra? I will remind you that it is already Sitra Achra, because Klippas Noiga is also Klippa, is also Sitra Achra. It's just perched on the fence where it can go out of Sitra Achra if used mindfully. So it was already Sitra Achra, though what happened is that it got knocked down into the same level as things that are forbidden. So you're taking the kosher food and eating it mindlessly, and it becomes spiritually as if it were not kosher. Or you're taking the kosher intimacy and doing it mindlessly, it becomes as if it were forbidden.
On the act, on the man, or on the what?
Well, he says, very excellent question. He says the energy that's in the drops of seed. So there's just like we're talking about when eating, it's very easy because it's obvious where the potential was and where the loss of potential was. Here, when you're talking about the intimate act, where's the potential? Where's the loss of potential? So he says the vitality of the seed. That's where the potential was, and that's where the potential is lost.
Potential or intention?
Potential and intention. The potential is capitalized through the intention. The potential is you're taking something that's not yet holy and making it holy. How do you do that? Through the intention.
So what should be the intention?
Okay, so
Conception.
now we're getting into a whole discussion which I do think is gender specific. And we know that there are things that are different for men and for women. When you're a chosen, you learn from Reishis Chochma, the different intentions, the different levels. There's not just one intention, L'Shem Shemayim. There are many different levels of intentions, L'Shem Shemayim, that are acceptable. And here's what I'm going to say. As progressive as I would like to think that I am, and I do think that I think it's a good thing to be progressive. I think it's a good thing to understand. I mean, let me tell you the opposite of being progressive. I've heard people say, why do women learn Tanya? It's written for men. I think that's a barbaric and ridiculous statement. So, yeah. So I think I'm the opposite of that. I think that actually women learn Tanya better than men. Like they're more, well, before you applaud, understand what I'm saying. I think women generally, if I can paint with a broad brush, are like more willing to take it seriously. Whereas men, I don't know, if maybe they get threatened, like, or maybe it's men don't ask for directions and like, I'll figure it out. Right? I don't know what it is. But so definitely Tanya is super, super applicable to women. But at the same time, you have to know the differences between men and women, especially when it's talking about these things. Look, we all know that men and women have totally different levels of obligation when it comes to marriage and procreation. Like the mitzvah pru'uravu, to be fruitful, multiply, is not even a mitzvah upon a woman. And there's different discussions about why that is. The simplest one is just why you don't have to command a woman. This is something that most women naturally are drawn toward. For a man, it's a commandment. Also, marital intimacy. It's a prohibition against the husband to deny his wife's conjugal rights, not the other way around. Although there is such a concept, I don't want to get into a whole discussion here of conjugal rights but let me explain like this. I think it would be, I could have skipped it. I could have made life simple. I could have skipped it, but I don't think it should be skipped, especially because it goes out on YouTube. And maybe you would say, oh, you should especially skip it on YouTube. And someone was telling me the other day, I did something on Tanya, and we actually discussed this line of Tanya at length. And somebody told me later, they said, there could be Bachram listening, because it was on YouTube. And I said, if the Bachram on YouTube, they heard much, much worse than what I'm saying. And everything that I'm saying is dafka, the antidote to everything else that they're hearing and seeing. So you Bachram watching on YouTube right now. Hi. You're hearing this for the first time from me? Yeah, this is where you got it? Like the famous story, I heard from a Litvak, it was about the Stipler, but I heard different versions of this story. It's one of those apocryphal stories that probably happened to many Gedolim. Anyways, a Bacher went to the Stipler and he complained. He says, I can't learn Ksubais because it gives me Shavazodis. Gives me, unwanted thoughts. Ksubais is all, whatever, if you know what Ksubais is about. So he says, Mistama, that's where the Shavazodis originated from. Like, get real. Like, okay, Ksubais, yeah, that's where it's coming from.
What does Ksubas mean?
Marriage contracts. Yeah, so they're different. Yeah, they're different marriage contracts depending on. Yeah. So anyways, anyways, we're gonna get into a real.
I get that.
Okay. Anyways, so here's the thing. What is intent? What is intent for a husband? What is intent for a wife? So I think it's very important to teach this to everyone, men and women. But I think you should understand that when it's speaking here this way about somebody having an animalistic intent and purely pleasure-seeking and failing to sanctify the act, it really is gender-specific. It really is speaking to more of a man's problem. And I think it could even be damaging that a woman would take this line of Tanya and feel pressure to live in adherence to this line here. I think there's a reason why it's stated gender specific. It's referring to challenges that are more a man's challenge to overcome and not so much a woman's. And I don't think it's something that we're not here to create neuroses in people's most personal, intimate lives. And so I don't worry about it, is what I'm saying. And don't worry about it for yourself, and for sure, don't worry about it for others. Just know about it. Just know about it. I guess that's what I'm saying. File it under the category of interesting information. That's what I'm saying. Okay? And if anyone needs to discuss it further, find a nice Rebbitzin to be your mashpia to talk about these things with. Okay? Okay. Yeah, that's it. I probably did more than my share here. Okay.
We did not learn that in school.
Of course not.
No.
Of course not.
I skipped right over.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Maybe let's do. Maybe let's do a couple of lines here, and then we're going to get to a good, a good stopping point. So, anyways, we're talking about stuff that's inherently permissible. So the food was kosher food, and it was just squandered. The opportunity was squandered. The intimate act was a permissible intimate act. It could have been the holiest thing, and it just was wasted because there was no particular intent. Okay? And therefore, we said, because the act or the food or whatever it is that we're engaging in is halachically permissible, it's very easy to get back on track. Now look where he says, Masha ein kain. Masha ein kain, not so. B'may cholis asureis ubies asureis. When we're talking about forbidden foods or forbidden relationships, so he uses both categories, the food and intimate relationships that are forbidden. Forbidden meaning halachically forbidden. Shehein mishalish klippas hatameis lagamri. They are all from that lower category of klippa, the utterly unclean, irredeemable klippa. Those are tied down and bound in the extraneous forces forever. Forever. So it's not like the kosher food that you ate mindlessly and you stop and say, oh, what am I doing here? Get back on track. And then you get back on track. Or the act of intimacy, which was a totally permissible act, and you forgot to think with a kavanah l'shem shemayim. So what am I doing here? This is Let me get back on track. Here we're talking about there was never any potential in the beginning to make anything productive of this because it was forbidden to begin with. Like we said before, asur, forbidden, means tied down. Is it tied down because it's forbidden, or is it forbidden because it's tied down? Right? We spoke about that. It's not tied down because it's forbidden because it's tied down. Hashem says, don't waste your time with it because this is irredeemable. You're not going to be able to make anything from this.
I thought it's tied down because it's forbidden. It's not forbidden because it's tied down.
It's forbidden, meaning Hashem says, don't bother it because it's inherently tied down. Think about it as something that is...
Doesn't Hashem tie it down because it's forbidden?
That's what I was saying before. It's not like Hashem is the Red Roof Inn who says, I'm bolting. No, I said Hashem's not the Red Roof Inn. See, that's what happens. Guys, when I'm in the middle of a mashal, especially a weird one, don't interrupt me, okay? I said Hashem is not like the Red Roof Inn, who they bolt down the lamp to the table because they're afraid you're going to steal the lamp. This is the Four Seasons. No one's stealing any lamps. If Hashem says it's forbidden, it's because it's tied down. It would be like, we had this prank when we were kids. This nickel that was a nail, and you nailed it into the ground. And then people would come try to pick it up back when a nickel was worth something. And then you can't pull the nickel up. And it was funny to watch somebody, I don't know, break their fingernails or pull their back out. I don't know why that was funny. Okay? But it was an actual prank that I had. Okay.
Maybe it's a boy thing.
And you never heard of that? No. Also the gum where it snaps your finger?
The gum, yes.
Yeah,
not
yeah.
the nail.
Yeah.
Not the nickel.
Okay. With the mouse trap on the stick of gum? Okay. And it's where the nickel that nails into the ground. So imagine somebody stopping, don't waste your time. Don't bend down to pick up that nickel. It's nailed to the ground. Oh, you don't want me to have it. No, it's not I don't want you to have it. I'm telling you, don't waste your time with it. You're not going to be able to pick it up. So Hashem makes it forbidden so that you don't waste your time on things that are never going to be able to be lifted, are never going to be able to be converted into anything useful.
So why were they created to begin with?
Why were they created to begin with? Classic answer. Free choice.
Wasn't that elevated just by our insanity?
We spoke about last week. Remember we spoke about last...
Good, but we can't access.
So we spoke about last week that the energy in it is actually from a higher source and that we can't handle it precisely because it's from such a high source, and therefore our relationship with it is a negative, meaning the lack of a relationship, and in not dealing with it is how we deal with it, and the elevation comes through not attempting to engage it. Okay, but he says here that something that was forbidden, the halachically was forbidden, that's tied down. That's not, I wasn't on my A game. I didn't eat the ham sandwich, l'shem shemayim. Let me get my focus back. No, you can have all the focus you want. The ham sandwich is irredeemable. You're not going to be able to elevate it. It's not that your intent was lacking. It's that it is fundamentally irredeemable. He says also, biyas asures, forbidden acts of intimacy. So it's not where, I should have had a better kavanah l'shem shemayim. No, the act itself was forbidden. There's nothing you can do with it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Let's say like in the times of the Holocaust where people were literally starving and they would eat.
Why the Holocaust? Please don't.
When somebody's literally starving and they eat that ham sandwich and it gives them life.
Okay. So your question that you're asking, I'm sorry I cannot abide by gratuitous Holocaust. I can't, it's just one of the things I'm allergic to as a teacher because it's like, you can't think straight. When you hear that word, just impossible to think straight. But you're asking about people who are starving to death. Unfortunately, there are people starving to death right now. Okay, in New York. Okay, fine. So I'm sorry, you just triggered me with Holocaust. So But let's change the question to be more less shocking. Okay, the question is, what about pikuach nefesh? Okay, so here's my question to you. It's a very simple question, and you're going to answer it yourself. I'm just going to phrase it to you in a way that will elicit a clear answer. Why is this food irredeemable?
Because Hashem said it's not going to do you any good.
It's not going to do you any good. I like how you said that. I didn't use those words. You used those words, and those are great words. Okay. So when there is a matter of pikuach nefesh, so then halachically, what happens? Halachically, I'm not asking you mystically.
It becomes mutter.
What? It becomes mutter. Okay.
Yeah, it's a whole different story.
Okay. So if that's the halachic mechanism, then there's a parallel spiritual reality.
Because you have no choice. At that point, you have no choice. There is no choice. If you have food to eat, you have choice. Free choice.
Oh, that's interesting.
If there's no food to eat and this food presents itself,
Right.
that's all that Hashem gave you.
But that means that
That's interesting. That's a very interesting way of looking at it.
doesn't that then, by definition, mean that there is inherent potential?
Yeah,
Okay, so now, because you're pushing, now you're going to get it complicated again. I did such a beautiful job making it so clear, and now you keep pushing. Okay. So you keep pushing. So the answer is, it's not so simple. You knew it was going to, if you kept pushing, you knew it was going to get to that point. It's not so simple. I wanted, at least the first time learning this chapter, I wanted it to be simple.
Because my meter expired, so sorry for you that I couldn't.
What do you say, your meter's expired?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, anyways, it's not so simple because on one hand, it is permissible. Halachically, in a case of pekuach nefesh, in a life-saving situation, it is permissible. So you can't exactly say that anyone's doing anything spiritually destructive. To the contrary, they're doing what Torah tells them to do. On the other hand, it's still stuff that would normally be forbidden. So it's not like you can exactly elevate it either. It's actually dealt with a little bit more, not here in Likutei Amarim, but later in Igeres HaKodesh, in the 4th section of Tanya. He deals with it a little bit more. Maybe that would be a good place to start from next week. Yeah, but let's just tie it up here, okay? Fine. So, something that was inherently permissible means that it has the potential to go either way, depending on how you engage it, your mindfulness. If you mess it up, just fix it. Get your intent back on track. Not so, however, things that were inherently set off limits, that halachically are forbidden, then there's no way of retrieving that and getting it back on track because it's irredeemable stuff. It's just not fuel for your car. Yeah. Oh, just one more line. Okay, so I said they are tied down forever. One more line. Ve'ein oilim misham, and they will not come out of there. These negative things will not come back up. Ad ki yave yomam v'vulo hamovis lo netzach, until their day comes and death is swallowed up forever. Kameshakosov, like it says, ve'esruach hatoma a'avir min ha'aretz. Hashem says, I will remove, I, not you, I will remove the spirit of impurity from the earth, meaning when Mashiach comes. So the stuff that's irredeemable, leave it alone. Don't touch it. Eventually Hashem will come in with the street sweepers and get rid of it. Okay?
So is this from the forbidden? This is from the forbidden.
From the forbidden things, you leave it alone. At the very end of history, Hashem will clean it up and get rid of it.
And it's everything that is.
That will everything will be redeemed. But you can't redeem this stuff. Hashem will redeem it. But there's so much of the world that we can and must redeem. Okay? Okay. All right.